Hey friends, welcome back to Fantasy Wash. Today we are going to be doing my top 10 favorite fantasy characters. I'm so excited. I was thinking about this quite a bit. So let's jump in. I'm going to do this in a order from least favorite to favorite. So starting at the number 10 spot is Father Chains from the Gentleman Bastard series. Specifically, he's very prominent in the first book, The Lies of Locke Lamora. I loved Father Chains. I really thought he was just such a funny character. You're going to find that there's a common thread throughout a lot of these characters and that many of them are quite humorous. Father Chains acts as not only kind of the parental figure, but also just this chaotic character in that he's teaching these boys how to be thieves. And I loved every scene that he imparted a lesson to Locke and the boys in general. I really just love that. We learn about the religion through Father Chains. We also just learn about life and how to manage as a thief through Father Chains. And I thought he was a really, really fun character. I haven't really seen him on many top 10 lists, so I'm hoping maybe people will put him on there in the future, but I definitely think he is a great character of the book. He was probably my favorite of the Locke Lamora first book. So Father Chains is coming in at the 10th spot. Coming in at the number 9 spot is Rodrigo Belmonte from the Lions of Alverson. I friggin' loved Rodrigo, and I was tempted to put Miranda, his wife, on this list as well because the two of them are just power couple goals. I loved them. Rodrigo for me was a perfect character in that he himself was not perfect, but was flawed in all of the best ways, a very stoic figure in that he knew his responsibility, what his role was, but also struggling with the fact that he's a husband, a father, and he's away from his family. All the while there are temptations in the world and how to react to said temptations. I just loved Rodrigo in terms of characters that I have read in historical fantasy and fantasy in general. I feel like Rodrigo is one of the absolute best that has ever been written. Really, so many of the characters from Lions of Alverson could be on this list because it is a really great character study book. I loved it, honestly, just love Rodrigo, love Miranda. Got to give Miranda a little shout out as well. But Rodrigo was perfection in a character. Coming in at the number 8 spot is a character that has emerged in many books. In some cases has been a narrator of said books, and in other times is just kind of there in the background and is hardly ever even mentioned. And that is Hoyd from the Cosmere by Brandon Sanderson. I love Hoyd. I know that people can be hit or miss on Hoyd. I think he is a phenomenal character. I love him in terms of being the narrator in Trust. I struggled a little bit with him as the narrator in Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, but I love him in the Stormlight Archive. I also just love him really any chance that we get of him. He is a storyteller, and some of the stories that are told in the Stormlight Archive are some of my absolute favorites, specifically the stories that are told in The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. I loved that so much. I think Hoyd is a really interesting character that we're only really starting to get to know. We're at the tip of the iceberg with him, and over the course of the next couple decades, as more Cosmere stuff gets written, I'm hoping that we will get more interactions with Hoyd, get to know him a little better, get in deeper with his character, see his origins and how he came to be this way. Like, there's just so much that we can do with Hoyd, and that's only part of what makes him such an interesting character. Really, it's his humor a lot of the time for me, but it's the storytelling and how Sanderson has woven in a character who is a storyteller into his stories. I love it. I love Hoyd. He's definitely one of my favorite characters. Coming in at the 7th spot is Mr. Wednesday from American Gods. Wednesday for me stole the whole show of that book. I love him so much. From the second we meet him on the plane when he's talking to Shadow, he is a grimy and darker character, one that you are inherently sure that you shouldn't trust, but you want to trust. He is mysterious and broody, all the while engaging and charming and enigmatic. He is the perfect personification of a deity. He is exactly who I would picture. Someone that is self-motivated, someone that is not really interested in helping others, but solely focused on helping themselves. He is, to date, my favorite god that I have encountered in literature. I love him. I know that American Gods is mythological retellings in the sense that he is incorporating multiple deities from multiple faiths, multiple religious practices, and kind of giving them a new spin. So in that way, it's a mythological retelling in American Gods. But Mr. Wednesday is sheer perfection. I do not know if they could have written that character, or Neil could have written that character any better, or if anyone could have. I love Wednesday. I love not only his interactions with Shadow in the book, but Zora was also amazing. And just really anytime he encountered an old god, that dynamic was magic. And then his interactions with the new deities, the new gods, was fire. All in all, love Wednesday. I love American Gods. Wednesday was definitely going to have a spot on this list. He's one of my all-time favorites. He's going to be there forever. Coming in at number 6, some people might say that this doesn't fall under fantasy, but I definitely think it does. I think it is sci fantasy, and that is going to be Severo from Red Rising. I love Severo so much. He is chaos in a person, and I just love him. I feel like there were multiple characters that I could have chosen from Red Rising. However, I tried to just pick one character per trilogy or book. There are a couple of characters that are going to be on this list that are from the same universe, but they're not from necessarily the same books. Well, that's not true. One of them definitely is, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I loved Severo so much. I felt like he was the perfect foil for Darrow, and that Darrow is much more stoic, much more level-headed, and Severo is just nuts, and he is the go-getter. He is the planner, and I feel like this relationship for me when I was reading it was very reminiscent of, if we want to keep the Roman comparisons going, of Augustus and Agrippa, in that it's Darrow as Augustus and Severo as Agrippa. Severo being the aggressor, the wartime hero. He is always the first to kind of run in, the first to put himself, his body on the line, to sacrifice himself for Darrow, for the cause. And I loved Severo. I loved his growth as a person individually. I loved his growth in terms of the characters around him, in terms of his relationship with his family, in terms of a relationship with a significant other. Really everything about Severo's growth is perfection. I haven't finished the series yet. I have 2 books left in the Red Rising saga, but I'm basing this really off of the first 3 books, even though I loved him in the 4th book as well. Really, just Severo as a whole is such a phenomenally written character. I love him, I love him, I love him. Coming in at the 5th spot, we are halfway through our list, and this is what I was referencing in having 2 characters from the same series, and that is Dalinar from the Stormlight Archive, written by Brandon Sanderson. I love Dalinar Kholin so very much. The entire Kholin family, for the most part, in Stormlight come in at the top as my favorites. Dalinar, I think, is such an interesting character in that he's older. We're getting the perspective of someone that is learning how to reflect upon their past, what brought them here to how they are, have second chances, not only in terms of romantic relationships, but second chances in terms of relationships with their children, relationships with those around them, learning how to have people trust them and view them differently, not only just as a soldier and as a menace, but as a politician, a leader. There's just so many layers to Dalinar, and I think that his arc in Oathbringer is one of the best arcs I've ever read for a character. I loved it. I love Dalinar in all of the books, but I was so stoked that we got a whole book really devoted to Dalinar. I wish we would have more books devoted to him because he is amazing. I love Dalinar. I think that Sanderson has done a phenomenal job with many of the characters in the Stormlight Archive, but in terms of favorite characters, it's gotta be Dalinar Kholin for me. Coming in at number 4 is a character that when I started the series, I thought I'm gonna hate this character until the very end, and lo and behold, they became my favorite character in this series, and that is Jaime Lannister of A Song of Ice and Fire. I love so many of the characters from A Song of Ice and Fire. I was debating putting others on this list, but when I thought about it and the list as a whole, I was like, maybe when I get to my reread, they'll kind of sneak their way in, but for the most part, gotta reserve that one spot for Jaime. Jaime's arc is one of the most meticulously done in that you go from loathing a character to loving them in a way that you don't even think is possible. The way that George R. R. Martin brings you on that journey and just puts you in the mind of Jaime, someone who comes across at the beginning as an abuser that you learn is someone that has been abused themselves and is just perfect. His relationships with those who are deemed enemies, his relationships with his family, his relationship with Brienne. All of it is so layered and is just done in a way that you look at it and you go, Jaime is probably the most complex character in fantasy. Like when you really, really get to the nitty gritty of it, like there's so much depth to Jaime that we do not understand when we start that series. And as the series progresses, you just latch on to him in a way that you never want to be parted and you never want to let go because he's phenomenal. So Jaime Lannister, definitely in my top 5. I love him. If I were to have to give shout outs to other honorable mentions from A Song of Ice and Fire, I love Stannis. I know that not everyone loves Stannis, but I freaking love Stannis and I love Davos. So those would probably round out my top 3 characters for Song of Ice and Fire. But Jaime Lannister, I love him. I love him. I love him. All right. My top 3 are all from the same world, but they're not from the same books. Coming in at the number 3 spot is Orso Dan Luther from the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I freaking love Orso so much, and I think he is a phenomenally written character. Talk about someone that just has complete self-awareness of their uselessness, but also lacks awareness in general. Like it was just such a beautiful marriage of personality trait and what is happening around him. I think Orso is a highly complex character and that he is someone who has been born into a position of privilege, but he does not want that position at all. He feels that he is not the right person for that job. He's not cut out for it. And in many ways, he is correct. But simultaneously, because he possesses that level of self-awareness and is able to kind of understand those that are around him, he is the perfect person for that job. So in so many ways, Orso is this really complicated but very humorous character. The dynamic of those that are around him are excellent. His preludes into romance are very, very funny. His relationship with his mother and his father is one that is highly relatable, and having a contentious relationship with one parent and a relationship that you don't quite understand with the other. I just think that Orso is everything that we could have wanted and hoped for in the Age of Madness trilogy. I think that he is really just one of the top tier characters that Abercrombie has written, and Abercrombie has written many phenomenal characters, but I think that Orso definitely deserves to be in that top tier. Coming in at number 2, I think this will probably be a contentious choice, but I don't care because I love him, and that is Bremer Dan Gorst from The Heroes and then also from the Age of Madness trilogy. Bremer, to me, is one of the best examples of what an inner monologue can do for a character, and also the marriage that Stephen Pacey and Joe Abercrombie have between the audiobooks and the written word bring Bremer to life in a way that I don't think I've ever experienced with another character, and that Bremer's voice of what other people hear is very high-pitched and very feminine, and the voice that he hears from himself is completely different. And the way that that was articulated in The Heroes was just one of the best experiences I have ever had listening to a book. I love Bremer. He is absolutely unhinged, insane, crazy, but also so funny to listen to. And I love that we still got glimpses of that in later books. I love the dynamic between Bremer and himself, Bremer and women, Bremer and royals. Like there's just so many different things that bring up so many humorous scenes for Bremer, and I think he is a brilliantly written character. Well done, Joe Abercrombie. It's not going to be any surprise if you have watched my videos before that you will likely know who my number 1 spot is. And that person is Sandan Glokta from the First Law trilogy. I love Sandan Glokta so much. In terms of talking about a morally gray character, Sandan Glokta is the epitome of that for me. He is a character that does deplorable things, but simultaneously you're rooting for him because he is written in a way that he himself has suffered and then inflicts suffering. It is the cycle of abuse that just does not break. And the way that Abercrombie writes his character is that he has the best inner monologue I have ever read. No one is better than Glokta. And if anyone ever becomes better than Glokta, I will be happy to, you know, knock Glokta down to second place. But for now, he is solidly in the #1 spot. Glokta is a character that I feel is relatable because he's so angry at the world. And people often are angry people because of what has been done to them, and then they reflect that anger back out at people because it's the only thing that they know. Glokta was born into a position of privilege. He was handsome. He had the whole world at his fingertips until that was snatched away. And you only know how to be yourself. And that when that is taken away from you, who are you? What are you? And Glokta is a very good example of that. Someone who was an elite athlete, someone who was very good looking and had women pining after him wherever he went, to go from that to being crippled, to being, you know, just mangled and very unattractive, and learning how to cope with that and transition into a career which is horrific. So much about Glokta is highly intriguing, but the thing that is the most intriguing about him is his relationships with other people. The relationships with people within the Inquisition, relationships with women, relationships with his one friend, and then relationships with the people that are brought into the Inquisition. I just feel like there is so much about Glokta that is fundamentally amazing, and he is just my favorite character of all time. I love him so much. I cannot articulate how much I love him. I've said it multiple times. I have a Glokta shaped picture on my heart. Let me know in the comments down below who your favorite fantasy characters are. If any of ours are similar, if we share any, I want to know. I really had a fun time doing this list. I'll probably do more of these types of things the more I continue to read. I'm just having a great time with fantasy right now. I think it is such a wonderful genre. It offers us such complex characters and ones that do terrible things, but simultaneously we can't stop reading about them and can't stop gushing about them. If you would like to help support the channel, you can always hit like and subscribe and leave me a comment down below. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Goodreads or any of that fun stuff, all of the information is in the box right there. It's down below. Thanks as always for spending time with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.